ones that were here last month will be really short. All right, well, in that case, I will go ahead and start. I know others are going to be joining us, but I'll go ahead and share my screen. Thanks for being here. The link to the slide deck was in the reminder email yesterday. I printed something like 5 minutes ago and it just now decided to print, so I hope you're not hearing a ton of background noise. Okay. So this first slide has links to all of the documents and tools that we're using today. The second slide has some Q&A. These were questions that came from some of the other working groups last month, but they were good questions, and so just wanted to kind of review them with each of the working groups so everyone's on the same page. The first one was, how does the equitable implementation relate back to not just the pros from the impact mapping, but also the cons? And that's a great question, and it definitely relates because we want to be considering all of those potential negative impacts from our strategies as we're rolling out our next steps. So be sure to, as we all know, if you get it right from the start, you're going to prevent a lot of problems later. So please be thinking about how to center equity in those next steps, considering potential cons that may come out of our strategies that were identified in the impact mapping, but we'll also be circling back and using those as we consider indicators and accountability at the next meeting. And then the second question was, how is this exercise not simply signing up people to do work? There was a little bit of concern about throwing out names and organizations without asking them first, but that's not what this is. This is just a brainstorm of, who should we invite to be part of the conversation for potential inclusion. And then the third one is, what's the difference between a community organization and an equity partner? And for our purposes, the community organization just has a broader scope as we consider all of the really important players that might be part of the decision making, the ones that come to mind first. But then kind of an extra exercise is to then put on that equity lens, thinking about those organizations that might be prioritizing equity in their mission. Maybe they represent specific neighborhoods or regions or groups of individuals that, provide focused resources to those communities. So it's just another part of the exercise to get us thinking in that direction. Any questions about that or comments? Okay, great. So let's launch back into this presentation. I believe everyone was here last month, so it's just a repeat of what we went over. It's just going back over those objectives: readiness, equitable next steps, implementation partners, and funding and financing. So I'm going to jump ahead actually to the framework just to remind you, to get everyone, I know it's been a few weeks, so to get you thinking about this framework again. It's these are all the components that are going into the development of our strategies. So we're thinking about the readiness of the subcomponents of the strategies. We're thinking about equitable next steps. We're thinking about partners, and we're thinking about how are we going to fund all of this. And then at the next meeting, we'll be talking about accountability and transparency and the indicators. So I like to think of these strategies, we're creating like a kit, like the kickoff to how are we going to get these going, whether it's, and we'll talk about accountability next month, but are we creating task groups? Are we asking departments to take this on? Are we putting together our own little, task force? How are we, whatever mechanism we create for getting these off the ground, we're the ones that created the strategies, or you are. So what do we need to hand off? Or if you're part of some kind of committee that takes this on, what do you need to get going in the right direction? The next steps. What exists out there in terms of readiness or what needs to happen before we're ready to take these forward. So these are all of the elements that are going into that implementation framework. So again, those 4 that we're going over today are defined here. And we're, just to remind you, we're looking at the subcomponent level of each of the strategies to make sure we're really making this plan actionable. And any questions at this point? Okay, so the readiness, just to remind you, is where we're asking, is it already underway? If there are parts of a strategy that are already happening somewhere that you're aware of, please call it out so we can make note of that. That's really important to note in our next steps. And then, is it ready to go? Are all the pieces aligned? We just need to identify the resources and the budgets and the capacity priorities to get it going. Is it aligned for implementation in another plan? That would be great to know, because that way we can kind of piggyback off or partner with other organizations or departments that are doing this. Does it require city action? Maybe there are policy changes that need to be implemented at the city level, or does it require state action? Maybe there's some kind of legislation that needs to be passed before we can move forward. So we want to identify that in the readiness conversation. And then, of course, going through the equitable next steps, which is where we're really spending most of our time. So just to remind you of that equity screening tool, it's a great tool for asking all the right questions. Wendy just put it in the chat if you need to open that Google Doc. And then let's see, the implementation partners, that's where you're really asking who needs to be involved in the implementation of the strategy for it to be successful, who could benefit from the success of the action, and what frontline or historically underrepresented community members or organizations should we include or ask to be included. And then the final piece that we don't want to spend too much time on unless you do have some great ideas is this financing and funding mechanisms. This is where, maybe you've seen some creative partnerships that have gone on somewhere else and been successful that we might want to consider. We can't expect taxpayer dollars to pay for every strategy. So we want to be creative so that we can get these approved and moving forward sooner rather than later. And that's going to take some strategic and creative budgeting. So those are just some ideas to get you thinking in that direction. And I know I went through that really quickly. So if anyone has any questions before we go into the strategies, maybe we can go ahead and do it. Okay. And since there are just a handful of us, I don't even think we need to break out because we only have a few to do. What do you think, Wendy? Just do it together? All right. Yes. So then, yeah. Let's see. Let's walk back through the ones from last month. We finished the first strategy. The second one is complete. The third one looks like we need to complete this one. So just to remind you, this is under Objective 1, achieve climate neutrality in municipal fleet operations and increase resilience and stewardship of transportation infrastructure.
Hey, Dawn, just to let you know, we're still seeing the slides. I don't know if you're meant to share something else.
Yeah, that's
you have to switch to the worksheet. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I probably need to share again then. So just a second. How's that? Can you see it now?
Yep. Yes. And I also put the link in the chat if anybody wants to pull it up on their own screen.
Great. Thanks for letting me know. All right. So this Objective 1, achieve climate neutrality in municipal fleet operations and increase resilience and stewardship of transportation infrastructure. We want to discuss this fourth subcomponent about municipal fleet electrification, and it says incorporate alternative fuel vehicles. Good timing, Calvin. We're talking about municipal fleet electrification So if we want to incorporate alternative fuel vehicles in the city fleet when electric vehicle options are not viable, is that ready? I think it's ongoing. What are the next steps that need to happen? And Calvin, I know you just showed up, and hate to put you on the spot. We have a pretty small group today, so we're all going to talk through these together very informally. But you know, we have our compressed natural gas refuse trucks. What other ones do we currently have with alternative fuels?
How everybody doing? We have got some biofuel. We have hybrids. And like you said, I have some EVs already and compressed natural gas. And we have a few biofuel, meaning gas and compressed natural gas. So it can run off of either gas or CNG.
Okay. Any
But-
propane? Do we have any propane? I'm curious.
No, we decided not to go with the propane, no.
Okay. All right. So, now when you said biofuels, do you have anything like, I know some localities where they were using some biofuels coming from like chicken waste byproducts and things. We're not doing anything like that, like a mix, biofuel mix.
Cook oil or something.
No.
Okay. All right. So is there some consideration in place for us to be considering when an electric vehicle isn't available? Is there some intermediary alternative fuel? Is there any protocol in place?
You asking me?
Yeah.
As far as one of the things we was waiting on was for your organization or your department to meet with the directors, and I don't know if they did, and those in Alicia's basket, I think last year or this year, to meet with the departments to see how they felt and where we could use some of the EVs at. So I use like RPD. We know we can't use EVs for everything, but maybe a hybrid vehicle. So you're still cutting down on your, they're going emissions, and maybe a gas works vehicle that runs for hours and hours and hours on a job. Maybe a EV vehicle weren't applicable for that. So we was kind of waiting, or I was kind of waiting to see what was the outcome or what was the roundtable, they're going to discussion with the managers or folks at the, they're going to department level. What is their take on this EV?
Okay. So can anyone think of any equity gaps that could be addressed with incorporating alternative fuel vehicles into the municipal fleet? Okay. Any potential partners? I know this is mostly an internal conversation. But if anyone has any ideas, let me know. I'm gonna say Virginia Clean Cities.
Yeah.
Partner. And any funding or financing.
Hopefully.
There's some grants. I look on page through NAFA and through some other stuff out of, North Carolina, because I was a part of that group. So there are, some potential other things out there we may, once we get our infrastructure together. I think purchasing the vehicle may not be as bad as we think until we get the infrastructure and what's the location for these charging stations and all that. I think that's the upfront piece is where are the charging stations, who agrees or not agree, but feel they can have one of these vehicles at their locations in short term and it's just the infrastructure. Because we could be purchasing some EVs as we speak, but again, there's no infrastructure to support, the purchase of the EVs other than what we have currently, in the motor pool.
Yeah, so that's really getting at that subcomponent above it, requiring all new vehicle and equipment purchases to evaluate electric
Mhm.
options that incorporate full life cycle costs and the social cost of carbon and budget forecasting.
Right.
So once we've identified whether or not electric vehicles can be considered, then the next question is, are there alternative fuel vehicles? And I see that Wyatt asked about police cars, and that is a conversation. I don't know if anyone here is in the know on the latest on that.
Some localities are, they're trying them out. Yeah, but I think it depends, like Calvin was saying, on the range and some of the capabilities, but I think they're coming. Like I know some municipalities are using Teslas, but it might be like Calvin said, maybe not for the actual police cruisers, but for some of the other policing activities that need to happen. And I think they're working on them.
Mhm.
Okay. So that's ongoing, and just want to make sure if anyone has any questions about it or any good ideas, I do want to capture that.
The only thing that I would add about is like just thinking about, you know, where the funding is coming from, because I know, you know, the police department doesn't have funding to even fix some of their internal issues as it is. So that would be my only concern, but thinking that most of this is probably going to be, you know, hopefully grant funded in some capacity. We're really not there yet, if I understand correctly. I don't think there's any reason why they wouldn't want to go EV. Do some logistics behind it, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask if there's anything being done looking into fleet pooling, because I know this is one of the big pluses that they've experienced in Roanoke and that Blacksburg is now trying to recreate, is that basically they realized they had a lot of city employees who didn't really need vehicles all of the time. And they were using government provided vehicles as kind of like an added bonus or perk for the job to compensate for maybe pay not being as high as it should be, which paradoxically creates the situation where you're spending a lot of money maintaining a fleet that you don't have, and you would have actually maybe had more money to just pay people more. But I know in Blacksburg, I'm going to paraphrase the numbers, but they basically took like 25 SUVs out of their fleet and were able to replace them with like 10 Nissan Leafs that they bought from used car dealerships in the area. And then they set up a fleet pool system where you only needed to check out a vehicle for your specific needs. So if you did need a truck, you could check out a truck. But if you're just dropping off forms at another office, you could take the Nissan Leaf. And that was a way where they bought new EVs, but actually cut the costs of their fleet program for that specific division in half. So I wonder if are we doing anything to see how many vehicles we have that perhaps aren't necessary for employees to be using, but could be checked out, and that might help lower the total number of vehicles that we even need to think about financing for electrification.
Yeah, great question. And that is happening. We have a big initiative called Fleet of the Future, and it has several committees. And one of them is looking at how to consider just that. Calvin, do you want to speak to it at all? He might be on.
Yes, ma'am. What we do annually, we run a underutilized report. So basically, when I first got it, it was doing 5,000 miles. This is not a large city, so we changed our policy to say you have to go at least 1,000 miles. So when I got it, we had about 2,800 vehicles. Currently, we're down to 21 something, believe it or not. So we have lost quite a bit. Currently, we still, again, run that report annually, and this year we'll see what that looks like. But again, based on the size of the city, and I use Blacksburg like he used, it's more of a town, I would call it, versus a large city. So obviously we have more functions than a lot of cities. We also looked at, like they're on Chesterfield and Hampton, which is a lot smaller. So the city of Richmond got quite, for example, RPD have 600 plus cars that's on the street, whether they are a patrol car, they are SWAT vehicles. So I got it, and we all, we do continue to look into it, but a lot of the vehicles that we do have are vehicles that is needed. Now, in the motor pool, we have vehicles that's there, whether they're vans or trucks that can be rented and leased on a daily, short-term, or a long-term lease. Inside of the motor pool, again, we have 4 EV vehicles. So we're using those first, and we're using those daily and weekly. When we first bought our first EVs, they was only going 100 miles average, with a charge. Now we're up to 150 with a new EV. So, we're slowly getting there.
Do all city employees receive a GRTC pass? I mean, now it's not necessary since it's zero fare, but I'm just wondering if that is, if that was typical pre-pandemic.
I can't answer that about the JRTC pass because that's not
Yeah, I
decided.
can talk about that because I
Yeah.
got a pass. So every employee has the option to get a pass. And the process to get it it was super easy and it's free. So, yeah.
I think it was limited just to going to work and going home from work though, and not anything in between.
Right. They track your trips. So that's what it's for, is commuting. But you can use it for, like I used it for an express bus, for example.
Great. All right, thanks. So then the last one on this strategy says support the local economy through local biofuel and negative carbon opportunities, generate workforce development, and identify climate resilience and redundancy measures of alternative fuels. It's pretty packed. There's a House bill that says establishes the Electric Vehicle Grant Fund and program for the purpose of awarding grants on a competitive basis to public school divisions. There's also workforce development and training to support the maintenance, charging, and operation of electric school buses. I'm not sure. Any thoughts on this one in terms of readiness? Is there something that needs to happen first? Any next steps that we could suggest?
I'll talk about readiness, Calvin, again. For us, underneath the word readiness, that means vehicle, that's available to you. So what we've done to be availability, even if we move forward and buy other vehicles that's EV, we have, certified technicians. So we have bought some tools. Again, some of the tools are totally different. Batteries are different. Storage areas for these batteries got to be different than, than your regular dry battery. So we definitely had to redo some things in our, storage facility, for batteries. And of course, we got technicians EV certified. We also reached out to our local dealerships to ensure that they had folks that was EV certified, because some of these EVs are under warranty, so it makes sense to us to buy equipment or these vehicles that's under warranty, and your local dealerships are not, prepared or have, that capability to service them. So that's one of the things that we reached out, to the dealerships, to partner to make sure that they could also work on EVs that was or are under warranty and provide parts.
Okay, so that goes back up to, again, the electric vehicles. So I'll put those as next steps. We need to consider everything that goes along with it. On this last one about workforce development, supporting the local economy and climate resilience related to alternative fuels. Any thoughts there?
So it sounds like maybe it's trying to kind of create a market for biofuels locally, and then for people to create them, and then for the city to use those as a backup source of fuel, I guess, maybe in case of emergency. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what our strategy is saying.
I think this is an Alan Harned, some language that started with him, so we might need to ask him unless there's someone else on here who has some thoughts about this one.
So is it, sorry, this is Julie. I joined a couple minutes late. Is it around, people being able to work on like natural gas vehicles that take biofuels or RNG?
Yep. Any equity gaps that we could consider on this one?
Yes.
Dawn, I just wanted to add, and I can put in a note if this is helpful, but J. Sargent Reynolds Community College does have an electric vehicle, and I think alternative fuel vehicle training program that they partner with VCU on, but it's only at the Goochland campus right now. So potentially something there around workforce development could be to bring some of those opportunities to Richmond, since VCU's in Richmond, but
Great.
I can look more into that.
Thank you. If you want to enter that in, that would be
Yeah.
awesome. Can any other partners that we might want to consider on that?
So I don't know if you guys know this, and I'm not an expert on workforce or training or HR or anything, but there's like an 11th cluster around the learning modules that's specifically focused on like energy jobs and green energy jobs. And Virginia has, hold on, I'm looking it up. Give me 1 second. Not the right place. And Virginia has the Virginia Energy Workforce Consortium. Have you guys heard of that?
No.
Like to
Yes.
me, this
Yeah.
might be a
I've
place.
worked with-
I'm sorry. It's not the 11th. It's the 17th Energy Career Cluster. And I'll put them in the. I think I have a link to them, and I'll put them in the chat. But to me, those are two things that like you need to make sure that these types of jobs are integrated not only into the community college curriculum, but also the high school curriculum.
Great.
Right?
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
The Goochland, so I'm familiar with the program, and a lot of, I believe that the way JSARG works now is they just bus everybody out to Goochland, the JSARG there. So it's not in Richmond's, but it does have a lot of individuals that live in Richmond that attend those programs, and there's.
Oh, looks like she froze. Okay, great idea. I like this.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are. Hi.
Okay, sorry, I'm out of the country right now and on Wi-Fi or my phone Wi-Fi, so I am not. I can barely hear. I might just drop off eventually because I can't. I'm having
your
issues.
Contributions are valuable. Thank you for being with us.
No problem.
All right, so then we've got a few more people here. I'm wondering if we should go ahead and split up. Let me just see what else we have to cover. Looks like we're done with objective 1 and 2. So there's one more with objective 2.
I think that was
Actually, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Might
So
as well
we'll
just
finish
stay,
up.
I think.
Yeah, let's keep moving forward. I know there are a lot of folks here, and I hope that everyone feels comfortable speaking up in this one room. But this is a great way to make sure that all of our subject matter experts have the opportunity to contribute to all of our strategies. So please, please speak up or put something in the chat if you want us to consider it. So I think it was just objective 2.3 or strategy 2.3 about, so the objective is create vibrant neighborhoods where all residents can easily ride transit, walk, or bike to meet daily needs in alignment with Richmond Connects. And the strategy is around residential mobility and complete streets. And that language says promote the stewardship of safe, walkable, and bikeable neighborhoods that connect Richmonders to jobs, necessities, and amenities throughout the city in alignment with Richmond Connects. Looks like we got through the first subcomponent. So this second one says implement pedestrian-friendly networks, such as ADA, street trees, solar-powered LEDs, through beautification and placemaking, prioritizing underserved and low-car ownership communities. There were a couple of notes from our impact mapping and some other feedback that talked about the need for a pedestrian plan from the city that can be a standalone strategy. For example, a pedestrian element to Richmond Connects, as well as street closures. And then another comment from public engagement period that said emphasize sidewalk repair and maintenance. So what do you guys think about the readiness of this? Does something need to happen first, or are we ready to go?
My first thought was that you're ready to go, but then I'm wondering whether, I mean, there's probably a ready to go to start the planning, but maybe not the building.
So what needs to happen with the planning?
I'm wondering if Richmond 300.
This is Jason. I
Go ahead, Jason.
sorry, I didn't want to talk over anyone. I believe that, and this is probably common knowledge, that Richmond Connects they're starting the process through the Office of Equitable Transportation, a kind of revisiting and revision of that. So I assume that could be part of that. I think it's in its early stages now, but
Okay. Yeah. Oh, that is in alignment. So say we get in alignment and Alicia does serve on that committee. So what do you guys want to hand to her and say, this is really important, bring this, to that committee, make sure that this is included in Richmond Connects? What would you say are those next steps?
This is Jason again. I think something kind of like what we have for the bike infrastructure, the high injury network would be very applicable there too, in terms of, but maybe not just high injury network or locations, but also just places where the safety of pedestrians is not currently adequately served.
In terms of where
in
to
the
start?
city. Yeah, I mean, for example, I mean, some of this is underway, but on a limited basis with the, I'm forgetting the acronym, but they have some signals that they have starting to place in certain locations that are considered priority locations, where you can actually press a button and it will stop traffic, and it's not necessarily to signal in.
Yeah, I think they're called hawks.
Exactly. Yes. So, I don't know, I think that's a fairly limited effort at the moment. So I'm thinking in terms of, further identification of places where that kind of thing could be implemented, or where, otherwise, additional safety or other measures for pedestrians could be incorporated.
So do you all look at like the walkability score? Like, do any of these mapping companies like Google have ways in which like you could kind of measure the walkability to kind of gauge whether or not you need certain efforts in more areas, or if there's a overlap between your climate equity index and walkability?
Anyone else here have an answer to that?
I don't have an answer to it.
Great idea.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome idea. On the climate equity index, we don't have like a layer or anything in there that I would say adequately represents walkability itself. And I believe the walk score tool is a citywide rating rather than pinpointing specific areas. What I do know though is that I believe on the Public Works website or somewhere I've seen that they're working on or have completed like a citywide sidewalk evaluation. And I don't know what's happening with that, but I will put a note on this one that we can follow up with them on that.
Well, so I put my walk score in for my office building, and I got a 93 walk score, a 63 good transit score, and an 83 very bikeable score. I work on East Main Street, 8th and Main. That's pretty cool. I don't know what would happen if I put another address in Richmond, if I get the same thing, but I kind of agree with that scoring too.
Interesting. What's the link to what you're searching on?
It's called walkscore.com.
All right.
I mean, there might be other websites or other tools out there that do that, but it'd be kind of cool to overlap something with that.
Yeah, interesting. Any other thoughts on next steps?
I'm sorry, did we have the link? My connection froze out when I think the link was shared possibly, or is that?
Sure. You said walkscore.com.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And I typed in my home address in Richmond, and it does give you different things. Cause like I get a 32 for car dependent, 33 for transit, and a 41 for bikeable. So it is giving specific Richmond information, it sounds like, depending on where in Richmond you are.
Great.
Yeah, so I don't know if I've noticed this, and I think it's because I've maybe started looking a little bit more. There's a bunch of I think there's tools out there now that have like come about because of algorithms that they can now run on like mapping and satellite imagery, and housing concentration, etc. That there might be some other opportunities for websites around in your strategic plan that maybe we hadn't thought of before.
Yeah, really interesting.
I know we sometimes use health metrics, which you get by census tract. So if certain things like diabetes or whatever are high, then they're the likely that that's not an active area and could mean there's not an opportunity to be active.
Space indicated by. Great. Can you think of any partners that we would want to consider in this? outside of city departments?
How about like maybe the chamber, the Richmond Chamber?
I would add bike walk RVA.
Sports backers.
What does that mean?
How about equity partners?
I know that the Richmond Health District, Richmond Henrico Health District, I believe, for a time had a organization, a kind of coalition they put together in the area where I live called Northside Strong. So I think there are health organizations that, including that one, that have, one of the things they were focusing on was things like sidewalks and that sort of thing.
Would neighborhood associations fall into one of these?
Say community organizations.
Yeah.
Possibly.
I don't know. I couldn't decide. So
Yeah, I think if we're prioritizing some of these neighborhoods based on health disparities or walkability or, actually partnering with those neighborhood associations on some level, I think would help get at the center equity.
I would also consider, these are state agencies, but Department of Blind and Visually Impaired, they do a lot of training to train individuals who are low or no vision on the streets, usually out in Carytown. And then Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services also does a lot with mobility. Statewide, but also in the city of Richmond.
Great. This is an important one, so if anyone can think of anything else to add to this in terms of partners, creative funding and financing to make it even more robust.
I was thinking of partners like private sector, like, Bon Secours or Aetna, like health insurance companies or something like that too, potentially. I don't know.
I'll just put that out there. It's a little, I see Aetna or Anthem at a lot of like community events and stuff to get people to sign up for, but it's still a very interesting thing to breach when you're talking about, the corporate mindset of health insurance. And actually, so they may have funding because of that. So I think that's a good point, even though I think that the private healthcare industry or insurance companies might be, they're very involved with the community already. So hopefully that's a good resource also.
So what do you guys think of, like, maybe companies like Fitbit or an app you could put on your phone that would like encourage people to walk? Like we had a competition in, like, at our company, we had a competition like whichever team walked the most in a certain period of time, they got like a little prize or something.
Yeah.
Like geofence it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we have a program called Go 365 where for every 1,000 steps I walk, I get 10 points, and they add up all year long, and then I can use my points to buy things at the store, which I normally buy gift cards to Amazon. And then they have activities or they have challenges along the year to get more points. And then there's wellness visits, you get points, doctor visits and stuff.
Mhm. Did you say active 365?
Go Geo, go 365. And I can't imagine it's the only one that exists.
No, I think Cigna does stuff like that too.
Yeah.
The other challenge is like, like, say I want to go to the grocery store, right? I'm not going to walk because I got to carry my groceries home. But if there was something like a walk program, where like you walk to the grocery store, but you get a big discount, to take a lift home. Do you know what I mean? But like
Yeah.
somehow pairing with some of these, ride hailing type solutions,
Problem
or
with
transit
with
solution or
Lyft.
whatever.
Problem with Lyft though is that their footprint is just as big as if you drove yourself sometimes, because they're circulating around waiting for your call. So they're traveling actually more miles than it would be if you drove yourself.
Wendy, you're muted.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
Julia,
yeah,
I want to keep that thought though.
Yeah.
because they're trying to convert their fleets to electric, I think, in a lot of ways, though, to like Lyft and Uber, kind of committing to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so that's why I agree with you, but that's why I was pairing it with the like walk one way.
Yeah.
You're saying like if you walk there, give you a discount to take the ride home. Otherwise, you got at least like to me, this is about encouraging people to walk.
Yeah. Okay, so pair
And
walk.
maybe the next.
Business.
Yeah.
It'd be almost better to say, we'll give you a cart.
I know, I was thinking of that too. Like in New York City, you always saw the people with the folding metal carts that you load your bags onto and wheel them back.
That's a good one too. I think it is, right? Because maybe
ways.
next time you're or walk both ways and get a cart.
Interesting.
I was just trying to think of more like what's the kind of a reward program we could do.
Okay, I think these are all great. So what I'm going to suggest, because we finished so early, and if anyone has a better idea, I'm going to stay on the line. Wendy and I will be here. But the link to this whole spreadsheet is in the chat, and it's also on the first slide of this slide deck. So now that we've gone through all of them together, if you want to look at them individually and add anything, take some time to add anything that you think would be helpful, that'd be great. Alan, I saw that you jumped on, and I want to keep you because I have some specific questions for you, but don't need to hold everyone else up. Thanks. So before I leave this spreadsheet as a group, does anyone have any questions or comments?
This is Jason. I just had a quick question. So it's perfectly okay to go back to some of this and add some additional things in some of the cells. Like I was just looking at the
Did we lose you? Yes, to answer that question. So feel free to go in. Please don't delete anything, but you can add to it. If you have information that's helpful, this is your work. This is the collective of the transportation working groups ideas. And so certainly want to give everyone an opportunity to look at every strategy and add what you think. Just don't delete it. This is a shared document. Does that answer that question? Okay. So yeah, just you'll click on the tab at the bottom to jump between it. We have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 strategies. So if you want to go through them and add in anything that would help set these up for success, please feel free to do that. And does anyone need to know where the link to this spreadsheet is? If you have any problems getting it, just let us know. Again, Wendy put it in the chat, and it's also on the first slide of the Google slide deck. So I'm going to stop sharing that. I'm going to jump back to the slide deck. Angela, it looks like you might have come off mute. Did you have a question? Oh, you're muted again.
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Great. All right. Okay, so we did the activity pretty quick. Again, please take some time to go back over them. Brianne, would you like to introduce this poll that we've put together? It's a quick poll.
Sure. So this is related to our next meeting. So it's currently scheduled for the week of August 23rd. The purpose of the meeting will be to wrap up the discussion on implementation and accountability for RVAgreen 2050. And we'll be talking about how to measure progress and success of the plan, and also how to demonstrate and hold ourselves accountable for that progress. So it's going to be an important discussion. It's currently, like I said, scheduled for the week of August 23rd. We know this is a time when you might be getting kids ready for school, taking summer vacation, other things going on. So just wanted to quickly poll all of our working groups to see if you have a preference between having the meeting that week or holding off on that until the week of September 13th. So you can either go on your phone or your browser to menti.com and enter that code, and it will ask you if you have a preference, or you can click on that link if you have the slides up on your own computer. And once we wrap up, I am happy to share the results of what has come in during the meeting.
Great, thank you, Brianne. So while you're filling out that poll, there's another link to the survey that we put up every time, and we would love to get your feedback for this meeting. What can we do differently? How are you feeling about this whole process? We certainly want to kind of take the pulse of the group to make sure that that everyone's feeling good and that this is a good use of your time. So please take that survey. If you have any updates that you'd like to share with this group, this is a great collective of transportation experts. So we'd love to hear your updates, share any upcoming events, any resources you want to provide. Feel free to use the chat for that, or you can also use the slide deck, the second slide of Q&A. Add to it, type in the box whatever questions or statements you have for us that you'd like us to share with the group. That's a great place for it too. So I'm going to stay on if anyone wants to stay back and go through a few more strategies with me. Otherwise, you are free to go, and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Don.
Okay, so Alan, there were some strategies. Can you see the spreadsheet if I flip back over to this?
Yeah, and I'll put it in full screen so I might see a little bit bigger, but yeah.
Okay. So for the first objective, no. It is
1.3. Was it 1.3?
Yeah, 1.3. This is about municipal fleet electrification. So I think we're pretty good. I certainly, if you want to go back through this on your own and add anything to it that you think would be helpful, that's fine. It specifically references the Clean and Green Fleet Report. But so require all new vehicle and equipment purchases to evaluate electric options and incorporate full life cycle costs and the social cost of carbon in budget forecasting. I know that you suggested some of that language. So what's the resource that we can start working in that direction?
So there are a couple helpful resources and public documents. One is a tool that is that probably is even available as like a little widget. So we might be able to program a tiny instant online widget for it. That is called and it's definitely easily accessible. It's called the A-Fleet calculator, AFLEET, which is offered by, AFLEET, which is offered by Argonne National Laboratory. And the tool would let you calculate out a duty cycle of a vehicle, how many miles per year, and compare a gasoline vehicle to a electric vehicle, and you can input your electricity costs and your fleet gasoline costs into that tool. And so we could make a 3-bullet procurement path for folks to analyze those. And then the last part is the social cost of carbon, which is a federally updated number that has a few different values. It has a high-end catastrophic climate change value, and it has a medium point value, and it changes over years. And the carbon would come out of any sort of calculator in terms of how many tons of carbon is created, and it would basically work to be about 50 cents a gallon in financial cost if you ignore catastrophic climate change. If you're focusing on just the direct fiscal impact of climate change, not thinking about things like storm events, etc.
So where's the resource for that?
The EPA, that's the one, Donna, in that manual or that policy document I was trying to write last week. I did put an equation in there for that, and then I referenced the social cost of carbon calculation to be one of the factors in that. And so I think the EPA, is that who does it, Alan, I think? Or I know I was able to Google it, and I guess the Biden administration is using like $51 a ton right now or something. So,
Yeah, the social cost of carbon is, I know I've detailed it in an email, but it is it's like a interdisciplinary.
It's an interdepartment, right?
Scientific analysis, and it has several different values. One is a catastrophic value, one which is that Biden like $50 a ton value is what it is, and that works out to be about 50 cents a gallon. So instead of 50 cents per carbon, it'd be like 50 cents per gallon would be what that last word should be, or 51 cents. 51 cents a gallon. And so there's the purpose of the White House putting that out is, and the federal government putting that out, is just to help folks inform people about it. So states Virginia put that into the Clean Economy Act, and like the state of New York has it in all of their planning. And so it's just a obnoxiously worded memorandum from intergovernmental agency collaborators. Okay, so that's the one resource, and then it's just a matter of picking that. And so it may be a matter of like reading through it a couple times to see if you think that the Biden number is good, or if there are some fleets or some areas where you would want to look at the catastrophic rate. And so you can think of, well, Richmond is accessible to water, and so there could be some catastrophic flooding, or there could be some other areas, and that catastrophic rate is about $1.50 a gallon right now, and it goes up to be like $2 a gallon by the end of the decade. So you will hear pushback from people saying 50 cents a gallon is not enough. And those people are considering the storm impacts or the agricultural collapse of climate change.
Interesting. Thank you.
And then let me drop in. I can drop that in as a link if we think about other questions for me. But let me drop the A fleet calculator. And what I think we would want to do is just lay out some standards for the A fleet calculator, which might be that it's expected that. Oh wow, it looks like my internet is going slow. So it might be some expectations of specifically the amount of money that you pay for retail or fleet gasoline. That could help you with your life cycle analysis. What does this say? Develop a plan. Fleet needs, I'm sorry, evaluate electric options that include full life cycle costs. And so I'm not sure where that language totally came from, but I do have a full life cycle calculator that we could try to share, or at least so it's, and maybe it's a matter of making like an easy access version, or having a procurement person do that quick check. Well, what is your
Yeah, we definitely need that easy tool. And Julie, I see your hand up. I don't know if that was from before or if you had something.
No, I think so. You guys are talking about total cost of ownership, right?
Right.
Yeah. Sometimes it's easier to kind of word it that way. And then I want to ask you, in this plan, I don't see it. Do you guys have anything? I thought I saw route optimization somewhere else, but how about idle mitigation strategies? Do you know if your fleet has a telematics system?
I don't believe they do.
Calvin is still on the line. I'm not sure if he has
Hi,
an answer.
Calvin.
He's probably multitasking.
And you do have a idle. There was one of the bottom sections that was the idle policy, and that could be a part of it. So that would be like a digital. I'm sorry, yeah, it might have been 1.2.
Yeah,
1.1.
1.1. Yeah, enforce an anti-idling policy among city employee drivers. So what should we add to that?
It does say or other technology, and so the what telematics devices would be like basically a cell phone in the car, a little computer that would share data back to the central fleet location, and that could provide some information. Julie, are you saying that's something that you've seen?
Yeah, I actually think it's a really useful tool, and it's something that you don't have to necessarily like have on all your vehicles all at one time. You could do like some sampling testing, see how some of the drivers are performing, then give them some feedback, then move those devices to another, portion of the fleet, see how they're doing, provide them some feedback. And the good thing about that is at times you can often get information on safety metrics.
Can I share my screen for just a second?
Hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I share my screen for just a moment to show this Argonne tool and how easy it might be to try to calculate some of this stuff? And this is the web widget version of the bigger spreadsheet. And so if you're doing multiple vehicles, you could use the bigger spreadsheet.
Yeah, I clicked allow and I stopped sharing, but I'm not seeing yours.
Okay. I'm going to share my full screen, which hopefully you're seeing this screen that's just this website that says A Fleet Tool.
Mm-hmm.
So so this is accessible right off a link that I may have dropped in or will drop in, and it says start new project, and then you can look at various types of vehicles like a passenger car with gasoline and all electric, and you could compare the price with some things like fuel price. And so say you've got a fleet location where it's 8 cents a kilowatt hour.
That's great.
And you know how much you pay for your gasoline, which, you know, maybe it's currently 280, and you could even do some options in here. And then such as how many miles per year you're driving it, and maybe a fleet vehicle's only going 10,000 or something like that instead of 12. And then you can calculate results, and it will actually show you some information about the, you know, in this case, a simple payback. And it does show some, you know, some pollutant adjustments, and it lets you export this. And that is, that would be based on like fueleconomy.gov data of the vehicles. You can see the fuel economy miles per gallon equivalent. And so
That's great.
sometimes the, you know, the vehicles will be closer in price. And so, but it would calculate the, and then there's a whole just extremely detailed spreadsheet version of all this that would allow other types of payback and climate modeling. This thing would also show the greenhouse gas emissions, and then you could model those, in this case, of tons. So you could say that's, you know, 2 tons more emissions from the gasoline vehicle.
That's great.
Which would be $40, or I'm sorry, $100.
Do you know of any other Virginia municipalities that are using this?
Not yet. I think actually everybody is aware of this, but we could ask Argonne for the list of who's.
Yeah, because that's what'll happen when we take this to procurement. They'll say, well, you know, what's the credibility of this and who's using it and all that.
You know, the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality used this tool, the A-Fleet, the larger spreadsheet calculator, and the other, in order for them to determine their impacts from their Volkswagen settlement.
Great.
And then it's Argonne National Laboratory is a federal laboratory, and that might be able to skirt some of the efforts. And so it's a free tool offered online by the National Lab, and there's 2 different versions. There's the web version, and there's the Excel sheet version, and you can get to them either way. So great, thank you. And we can make another little baby calculator too, if it would help. So and then fueleconomy.gov has information on every sort of vehicle, so you could require them to compare it. And this came up, I think this didn't come up through us. I think something like this came up as a, did it come up through a council request or? Okay.
Yeah, there have been so many conversations. I just can't even keep track of.
I'm going to drop in fueleconomy.gov, which is a U.S. EPA and Department of Energy partnership, and they detail every single regulated vehicle sold in the U.S. that's a light-duty vehicle. By make, model, year, you can see all sorts of environmental data, including the likely fuel use, and that might also be an option that might be easier to use even than the. So I'll just share my screen one more time. I'm sorry. I hope this doesn't feel like a waste of time, because it could be.
Not at all. This is great.
Could be a valuable shortcut.
Yeah.
So if you go to find a car, you can compare cars side by side. And in this case, you could look at like a 2020 Chevrolet that is a gasoline vehicle, like well, here's the electric one. And then you could look at a 2020 Chevrolet Malibu, if you were asking them to compare the two, and that did not work properly. So let me just add that again. This one might be just less clicks, but you could give them the option to, so this would be selecting the automatic transmission for a Chevrolet Malibu. And so you can see, well, this vehicle only has 200 miles of range, but if your trips are 25 miles a day, then this vehicle will be adequate. And then it does show this little life cycle. Here's a 5-year. And so what you could say is that you expect a 10-year life of your vehicle. So you multiply this number by 2. So this would remove, this would be a life cycle. This would be a partial life cycle calculator.
Great.
And there's all sorts of, we could build other tools. So so this is also built by the EPA and the federal. So this is Oak Ridge instead of Argonne, but it's a national laboratory. And so if there's a tool out of this that would be worth building, we could send an email to the folks who are managing this and make a new widget.
Great.
So this does show the emissions as well. So here's the grams of tailpipe CO2, and you could do tons per year. So
Great.
You know, I would just add to that. It looks like the A fleet tool has more of maybe a fleet focus because you're going to have vehicles in there, like, you know, maybe a box van, right? Maybe a garbage truck.
you're totally right. You're totally right.
Yeah. So you just like, so you just have to think about, you know, I don't know what the makeup of your fleet is, but I'm pretty sure it's all kinds of vehicles, right?
Oh yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of passenger vehicles in there. But that's one. Just gotta think about that.
Yeah, great. Okay, thanks. So that was super helpful. I think the other question we had for you was support the local economy through local biofuel, negative carbon opportunities, generate workforce development, and identify climate resilience and redundancy measures of alternative fuels. We were kind of, you know, the only next steps we kind of came up with were, could we consider training, incorporating these into green job programs? Do you have any other thoughts?
Well, so the president's going to announce today this goal to start selling 50% electric, to get up to selling 50% electric vehicles by 2030. And like, there's just so much other fuel that's being used and so much other decarbonization options locally. What started the biodiesel industry was trying to get less waste grease dumped into the sewers.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a biodiesel company, Rico Biodiesel, that does like soil remediation in the Richmond area. There used to be an ethanol plant that did corn-based biofuel in the Richmond area, and you can make ethanol out of like waste paper. You can, like, it's just sugar. It's just so. What are the steps? I think the steps would be for the vehicles that are not yet electrified to consider other drop-in biofuels, and those could be job creation opportunities to turn waste grease into biodiesel or waste sugars into ethanol. Or in this case, it would be also waste methane from landfill or from wastewater could be used as a renewable natural gas source for the buses until the buses switch over to electric. So what would the next steps be? Would be maybe for us to brainstorm if any of those are realistic or if all of those are just insane.
Okay, great.
We want to make them cost effective. We want to find the jobs model. If there are jobs, maybe there's economic development funding from, you know, the state or federal partners. So
that's why I was asking about the idle monitoring, because I think you'd be surprised that you'd probably save half. I'm making this up. I have no idea. A good portion of your emissions just from mitigating idle. Plus, idle causes you more maintenance.
Mm-hmm. So Yeah, on that first one, transportation demand management, support commute alternatives for city employees through a framework, a TDM framework, and then the anti-idling policy. Consider anti-idling zones as well as pedestrian transit. Maybe we need to add more to this.
You're trying to be more than a policy, unless that includes what's the word? Not enforcement, encouragement. I also want to ask you guys, where is your depot? Is your depot located in a particular neighborhood that has a high climate index, inequity index?
It's kind of in an industrial area. Yeah, there's not a lot of housing immediately adjacent to it, but there's some nearby, I guess I would say. Yeah.
I mean, that's a benefit, right? To the local population there, as you decarbonize, is a good measure, I think, to like quantify your impact as you green up your fleet.
Mm-hmm.
Are there some like regular routes that you use where there's where the climate equity index is, I don't know if it's low or high. I don't know what the right word is, but
Yeah, that's
are there consistent routes?
Mm-hmm.
It looks like a really strong minority percentage area, maybe 70-80%.
It is, yeah.
So there might you might be able to tell a good future story around that, if that makes sense.
And
like kind of justify what you're doing.
Maybe 60 to 70% low income percentage in that same area. So if jobs could be created around that, or if there could be some additional services, yeah.
So you could also do something like shared charging in that area. Maybe take 10 of your chargers that you're using for your city fleet and make them accessible, to the public for a certain period of time during the day or the evening or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Great ideas. Love them.
Alan, I was late too. That's why I stayed on.
I appreciate it. Are there any other ones that you guys want to look at together, or do you just want to go off and click through them on your own?
Did you guys see the White House Justice 40 initiative, where they're really just doing 40% of federal funding for a bunch of climate programs will go to environmental justice areas? And
Yeah,
then, sorry.
No, go ahead. Keep going.
And then the Senate bill, which funds a bunch of interesting programs that might go into those areas. So it'd be like billions of dollars, but then the focus would be on the same EJ criteria that you guys are looking at.
Yeah, that came up in the waste group this morning. They're like, okay, it looks like all this money's gonna be poured into this. What's your plan for grabbing it? And I'm like, I don't know. Tell me. I think that that's part of that's an opportunity we have, is to come up with the good ideas to present, to make sure. And that's, a bigger conversation, but certainly all of our strategies directly relate.
So have you guys talked to Fairfax County? Because they won the DEQ, or won, I don't know if that, they were awarded the grant on the fleet side for the DEQ funding. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
the Volkswagen settlement.
Yeah, we
They're-
actually, we applied, or we got very far in that process, but it required upfront funding and it was in the middle of a budget cycle and we could not come up with the $1 million required. So we had to, but yeah, that coming up with some kind of a, a funding mechanism so that we can take advantage of those opportunities when they come up, even if it's mid budget cycle, is really important.
Yeah.
They,
So the
the
other
way
thing
Fairfax does it is
I was
they,
gonna-
before they
Go
accept
ahead.
any, so the way Fairfax does it is before they accept any grants or apply for any grant, they go in front of their Board of Supervisors and pass an ordinance. So that's how they're able to get that approved.
Interesting.
Okay. That's tough when you only have 30 days to turn around a response too. There is going to be more funding in that because I don't think that, yeah, Fairfax received it, but there might have been a few million that they did not receive that was not announced yet. And so that could be another round.
Great.
So the one other thing I wanted to point out, and I before we leave the meeting, because I want to verbalize this and not put it on your sheet, is like I don't think you all are eligible for the federal tax credit. So like when you use some of the calculators, I don't know like if that tax credit's automatically included. You want to be careful of that. But maybe that's something not on the legislative front, but maybe kind of like on a policy perspective. I don't know. I don't know how you guys lobby the federal government or the state government, on finding some not tax, but some kind of benefit for you all besides DEQ funding or Volkswagen settlement funding, that helps with the green transportation transition. And maybe those funds are the ones that are going to come through the federal government. But just kind of keep that in mind. If you, and I don't, Alan, maybe you know this, like maybe if you finance your vehicles, your fleet, the financing company can take advantage of the tax credit and thereby you benefit like through the lease payment.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So if you that might be how you take advantage of it.
And, you've got the ability now with the PACE financing or with some other stuff to work with banks on some renewable energy issues. You could ask them to bid you on that. Here's the challenge, though, is that some of those banks don't give you the full tax credit. They would give you just a portion of it. So working with your existing lenders or folks that you have relationships with that might take a less of a administrative nibble off of that. The climate mayors, and I know Richmond is a climate interested city, but I don't know if you're an active member of climate mayors. They have a procurement with Sourcewell, which used to be the joint purchaser group, but it's called Sourcewell now. NJPA, National Joint Powers Association, which was like cities buying stuff together.
Mm-hmm.
They have some banks that work with them on a writable municipal contract. So if you don't have a lender, they've got ones that would work with you on some of that procurement. For the heavy duty vehicle stuff, there's going to need to be a new federal category that would be closer to $100,000 per vehicle rather than $7,000 just isn't enough to move the light duty vehicles, let alone the heavy duty vehicles. So that is to say that I think you're very right that a financing entity that's in the private sector could take benefit from some of the tax credits. The same would be true maybe for infrastructure. So you might be able to partner with somebody like the state partnered with DEQ. I'm sorry, EVgo. And so if the EVgo chargers are being installed, well, maybe they could get the tax credit, which is 30% for infrastructure, just like maybe a same power purchase agreement you guys would have with solar. So that's it's the same little thing as a power purchase agreement, maybe.
Yeah, there are some hurdles there too, but it's something we're trying to make some movement on. So Great ideas. Alan, on objective 3, private and commercial vehicle electrification, just want to make sure you get your eyes on those. Facilitate the transition to affordable, convenient, and reliable electric vehicles for transit, and also for private. So if you just want to look through that when you have a minute and add anything that you think would be helpful.
Will you pop that on the screen again? I'm sorry.
Yes. So it's objective 3.1, private and commercial vehicle electrification. And there are 2 subcomponents. The first one is facilitate the transition to affordable, convenient, and reliable electric vehicles for transit, and then also for private. So one of the breakout groups went through these last time. I'm not sure if you were in there or not, but just want to make sure you had a chance to go over those. 3.2.
And I think I was in the previous group, but I'm going to make a little note to myself, and I will be taking a look at that. And if I have anything else to add, there's some. But I think I was in the group that worked on those previously.
Okay, great. And also the charging infrastructure on 3.2. So 3.1 and 3.2. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for all that fantastic input from you and Julie. Really, really appreciate it. So that's it for today, and we will be in touch with what's next.
Thank you. Thank
All
you
right.
for including me.